There's something I really need to get off my chest here. I have lied to you, my customers, my followers since I was about 17 years old. Now, before you decide to burn me at the stake, give me a chance to explain myself. So, I've always been a huge advocate for companies such as ServeSafe, who will sell a certification for what is appearing to be that of common sense. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of useful information to make sure that the people within the restaurant industry or service industry as a whole are well qualified for the positions that they're in to make sure that no one really gets sick, no one's held liable for any kind of damages that happen within the restaurant itself, but for overall, just making sure that they're in the right position to doing the or making the decisions that they need to in order to move forward. And there's been has some little bit of a hiccup that happened recently, and I would like to talk about it real quick. So I don't have to be the kind of person to sit there and say that it's pretty obvious that the tip wages within the United States itself right now have been it's been becoming more of a problem with every passing day. It seems that every time you go out anywhere at all making a single purchase, you always have the option to tip. And quite frankly, that's not what I'm trying to get at. But the rise of that occurring has really brought this to light, and I don't think it would have happened otherwise. Now, let me just talk about this again real quick. All right, so there's a company out there called ServeSafe. What they do is they sell a program for about $15 and make sure that once you're in the industry itself, after a certain amount of time, that you're well qualified to serve food to customers. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of the questions that they ask you, a lot of things they train you on, a lot of things they test you on, they're pretty you almost any single person can be just pulled off the streets, answer these questions, and pass with flying colors. And for the longest time, I was a huge supporter of ServeSafe and other similar products and competition out there to make sure that the people within the industry were as well trained and prepared beforehand to help minimize any potential problems that may occur. Until I found this out. And quite frankly, now my blood is beginning to boil a little bit because I've been in the industry for so long. I've seen so many people struggle, and a lot of these people are struggling now today because of this company. Now, it's no surprise that many people within the restaurant industry as a whole or have their salaries based on that of a tipped wage. And basically what that is they get a reduced minimum wage compared to that of the national average. For at least in the state of Maryland right now, it's about $3.63 an hour. As low as $2.13 in some states and as high as about $8 minimum wage for being a tipped employee. Basically, what this means is that the restaurant as a whole can assume that you're going to have some form of tips coming in to help counterbalance the missing wage that you're not being provided by the employer. Whether or not this is completely legal has been a discussion since the beginning of time, but it turns out that it's all because of a company such as ServeSafe. Now, if you want to quickly review this article, it actually has some amazing information. Some of the stuff that you probably already knew before and didn't realize, some of the stuff that might have been left in the dark before, and some stuff that might be a little bit new. I was very, very surprised when I found out that ServeSafe, the money that was coming in to what you would think would help their employees that they were sitting there preparing, was actually being used to lobby against their rights within the industry. Now, that is a bit of a stretch. I could tell based on just a single article, but after reading through this and looking into multiple other sources, it has been determined that this is actually a true statement. So companies like this have to make themselves remain as relevant as possible for as long as possible. That way they can still generate some form of income. To the point where I almost respect it. They're making a problem so they can be hired to solve it. However, they have ruined a lot of people's lives in the process. And by a lot of people, I mean roughly 22.42 million people in the United States are active within the service-based industry, which is, host, server, bartender, bar manager, in some situations, even bar owner. And all of which have been directly affected because of laws that have been lobbied through this program of ServeSafe. Now, it didn't always used to be like this. So this company really started to get most of its traction around 2007 for about 3.6 million workers within the United States at about $15 a head, which in some situations, some of these employees would have to actually pay for their own certification. Luckily for me, whenever I was in a position, the company that I worked for at the time period would actually pay for it. However, where the money came from isn't really where the problem lies. I like to go on the record saying I'm not for or against changing the minimum wage for tipped employees, because in this situation, I feel as if I'm very biased being a bartender. I cannot lie. I do well for myself. I'm by no means struggling by any way for any means, but I am far outside of the normal range. So when this is kind of coming into play, I'd like to not be included. However, there are a lot of people out there, especially in more struggling based areas, that are not in the same position as I am. Here we have an example. I'm sitting here working hard, paying this money so that I can work this job, so I can provide for my family, said Mykesha. Hopefully I didn't just butcher that name. A 40-year-old line cook who works at Carl's Jr. Hamburgers restaurant at a private school cafeteria in Los Angeles area. And I'm giving y'all money to go against me. And this really just bothers me because even with corporate law, even with the minimum wage the way it is, even with the structures that we have, there's still companies out there that are fighting against the rights for employees within a restaurant to even make their ends meet. And their voices aren't even being heard because in some situations they're now considered tipped employees, whether they see any tips coming through or not. And there has been a large rise with the increase of POS systems, which is a point of service system, such as Square and Toast, where almost every time you go out now, there's a form of tipping that's almost required every time you make a purchase, even if you do all the work yourself. Now, I am not trying to get into POS systems as a whole. That's for situations like that, I digress. It's even got to the point now, too, seeing as that ServeSafe really just started to become popular back during 2007, that other companies are also offering training, which are almost identical and on par to that of what our ServeSafe offers, which is actually mandatory in almost every state within the United States as a whole. But the restaurant industry veterans say that ServeSafe is the dominant force in the market, to the point where some restaurant owners did not even know that or realize that there are other alternatives. This is absolutely absurd. Like, how can companies be so left in the dark to the point where they don't even know there's options out there that would benefit not only their employees, but their bottom dollar as well? Even having a direct quote from the president of the National Restaurant Association, the association's advocacy works to keep restaurants open, keeps workers employed, and it finds pathways for workers' opportunity and keeps the communities healthy. But if you know anything about the restaurant industry at all, if you've even served a single table before, you know this is complete and utter bullshit. All this does is prevent these people in these job positions from finding other job alternatives. They're literally shackled to positions like this, and there is no escape. There's a little joke within the bartending industry saying that once you start as being a bartender, you're always a bartender. Once industry, always industry. It's hard to leave these job positions. And it's not just because you're handing cash at almost every night you go in there. It's because there's not too many alternatives as far as moving up, down, across, outside, or starting any other kind of job business. And I'm not saying this is because of a lack of education. I'm saying that it's because people are being left in the dark and not knowing that there are other alternatives being offered. Even during the Obama and Clinton administrations back in 2010, earlier than that, they tried to increase the minimum wage for all employees everywhere within the United States. And this completely glossed over the fact that tipped employees were just not even included in this. Not one single right was granted to them during this time period. It even got to the point where healthcare started being talked about for all employees that worked at least 40 hours a week. They tried to exclude that of the service industry as a whole because they could not find the funds in order to provide it. And this was by no means because of the owners of these bars, restaurants at all either. That money was there. They were willing to offer this, but they were being lobbied against offering these rights right away. It literally took decades in order for this legislation to pass for the restaurant industry as a whole. And there's some people now that still can't even get it. My thoughts on universal healthcare are not a part of this conversation by any means. This is solely for the service industry as a whole for the service industry. And lobbying records even show that state affiliates pushed for a broader, less common type of mandate covering all food handlers like cooks, waiters, bartenders, and those who just bus tables. As if we all in this service industry base as a whole were paid the same going rate across the board for multiple different jobs within the restaurant. And this is by no means just a singular job that is universal no matter where you go within the restaurant. The bartender is not trained to be a cook, or at least they shouldn't be, and you just can't pick and plop single individual people within the restaurant to work a different job and expect to pay them the same shit rate. And I like how they're not even trying to hide the fact that they're lobbying for this or either. If you have 1 million people going through that thing, do the math. At $15 a head, if you just have a million people rolling through on a program that you essentially just put together in a freaking PowerPoint and throw it on your website with absolutely no real recourse for what your actions are occurring, why not? As a business aspect behind this company, they're freaking geniuses. On a morality and ethical standpoint, they're fucking dog shit. And somebody needs to do something about this. We always said the first course cost you $1 million. Mr. Dickface said, for making that video, and the rest are free. You have got to be shitting me right now. Because human rights apparently just go right out the fucking window after you make your first $1 million, all because it cost you $1 million the first time you wanted to make it. In addition to this, and I know it has nothing to do with this article, many people don't seem to realize that when you're a tip-based employee with a income that is projected for you to make a tipped wage on top, whether you get tipped or not. Let's say you're waiting on a table and the combined total for that tab is exactly $100. I know the chances of it being $100 flat with no decimal, with no change whatsoever is very minimal, but this is just for a reference point. Many states will sit there and tax you on a 15% assumed tip, whether you get that tip or not. So let's say you get made $20 off that tab, as if a 20% tip were to come in. You would get tipped on a assumed tip percentage of 15%. Technically speaking, you're kind of lying to the IRS in this situation. However, let's say you got stiffed and you didn't make anything at all. You would still get taxed on a 15% assumed amount. So you're actually paying taxes on money that you didn't make. So you actually paid the government for the chance and the opportunity, the mere privilege to serve that table and give up your valuable time, effort, and in this situation, money that you probably are barely making ends meet anyway. This is all because companies like this refuse to sit there and grant more rights to employees within the restaurant industry. And it's been decades and nothing has happened. I just want you to think about that a little bit. If you feel the same way, if you have any more information on this, you would, by all means, if I'm wrong for any way, for any reason whatsoever, please, for the love of God, call me out. Because I'm fuming over here looking at situations like this that just, it bothers me to know that there's options out there, that there are people that can help, and no one's able to really do shit. All because corporations like this, all because companies like this, all because programs exist like this to really just damn the middle and lower class to a lower standard of living just to make more of a profit. Anyway, if you like this video, if you want to see more like this, if you want to talk more about this, by any means, let me know in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe for more. I'm gonna go. I gotta go walk this off. As always, guys, have a great day, y'all.